Listen, I have been a diplomatic attaché for the Vorthan Collective for 93 cycles, 93 cycles. I have sat through peace negotiations that lasted longer than some species' entire civilizations. I have watched delegates argue about the color of conference room walls for 6 months straight. I have seen grown aliens weep over treaty font sizes, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day we invited a human to observe the Krell Mordax peace talks. My name is Vec. Just Vec. No fancy titles, no dramatic surnames, no mystical ancestry. Plain old Vec. And honestly, after what I witnessed, I am grateful for the simplicity. My brain needed something stable to hold on to. The Krell and the Mordax had been at war for 600 years. 600 years. Do you understand what that means? Their great, and add about 40 more greats, grandparents started this conflict. Nobody even remembered why anymore. Oh sure, both sides had their official histories, their sacred texts, their propaganda reels. The Krell claimed the Mordax had insulted their celestial mother by parking a cargo vessel in a holy star system. The Mordax insisted the Krell had violated an ancient treaty by mining on a disputed moon. Spoiler alert, both sides were probably lying, or at least wildly exaggerating. The war had become tradition. Cultural identity. Every Krell hatchling learned to hate the Mordax before they learned basic mathematics. Every Mordax warrior practiced their war cries before they could properly speak in complete sentences. The casualties numbered in the billions. The economic cost was incalculable. Entire planets had been reduced to radioactive wastelands. And yet here we were again. Attempt number 4762 at peace negotiations. The Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, had decided to try something new this time. They wanted a neutral observer, someone with no stake in the conflict, no historical bias, no political agenda, someone from a species that had only just achieved interstellar travel about 70 years ago, a human. When Director Quinn announced this decision, I genuinely thought it was a joke. I laughed, out loud, in the middle of the briefing. Director Quinn did not find it funny. His eye stalks drooped in that particular way that meant I was getting assigned extra paperwork. The humans, he said, his voice dripping with the kind of patience usually reserved for small children and mentally unstable warp drive engineers, have successfully resolved several conflicts on their own planet. Their perspective might prove valuable. Director, I said, trying very hard not to sound too sarcastic and failing miserably, they only stopped having world wars on their planet like 80 years ago. They still have armed conflicts. They argue about everything. Have you seen their information networks? They fight about what to call sandwiches. Which is precisely why they might understand the Krell and Mordax situation, Quinn replied. They have experience with seemingly endless conflicts. I opened my mouth to argue further, then closed it, then opened it again, then closed it again. I probably looked like a broken airlock. Fine, I finally muttered. But when this disaster happens, I want it noted in the official record that I objected. Quinn's eye stalks wiggled. So noted, Vec. So noted. The human arrived 3 days later. His name was Marcus Webb. Simple name, easy to pronounce, which I appreciated. He was tall as humans generally are, with dark skin, gray speckled hair, and these incredibly calm brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything around him without judgment. He wore a simple black suit, human style, with a blue tie that was slightly crooked. This detail bothered me more than it should have. We were about to mediate a 600-year-old war, and his tie was crooked. Ambassador Vec, he said, extending his hand in that peculiar human greeting gesture. He gripped it carefully, having learned from previous encounters that humans enjoyed crushing each other's appendages as a sign of respect. Observer Webb, I replied, welcome to Outpost Serenity. I paused. The name is ironic, in case you were wondering. He smiled. Not a big smile, just a small quirk of his lips. I gathered as much from the plasma burns on the outer hull. Yes, attempt number 4738 got a bit heated. I can imagine. No, I thought. You really cannot. The negotiation chamber was impressive. I had to admit, the Galactic Council spared no expense when it came to peace talks. The room was massive, circular, with a domed ceiling that displayed real-time feeds of both Krell and Mordak's homeworlds. A reminder, supposedly, of what they were fighting for. Two long tables faced each other across an expanse of polished stone floor. Each table could seat 20 delegates, plus advisors, plus security personnel. The temperature was carefully calibrated to be equally uncomfortable for both species. The air mixture was precisely balanced to make everyone slightly irritable but not hostile. Yes, we had learned that hostile air mixtures led to actual hostility. Attempt number 2614 taught us that lesson the hard way. The Krell delegation arrived first, as they always did. Punctuality was a point of pride for them. They were an insectoid species, all chitinous plates and compound eyes, with mandibles that clicked constantly when they were agitated, which was all. High Commander Thak led their delegation. He had personally commanded fleets in 300 separate engagements against the Mordaks. His exoskeleton was covered in ceremonial scars. His antennae had been decorated with honor rings. He looked like he had been genetically engineered to intimidate people. Ambassador Vec, he buzzed in greeting. Another waste of time. High Commander Thak, I replied with forced cheerfulness. Ever the optimist, I see. His mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or irritation. With Krell, it was hard to tell. The Mordak's delegation arrived exactly 3 minutes late, as they always did. Making the Krell wait was their petty form of rebellion. They were reptilian, covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors based on their emotional state. Currently, the delegation was displaying mostly angry reds and confrontational oranges. Supreme Counselor Drava led their group. She was ancient, even by Mordak's standards, having lived through a full third of the war herself. Her scales were pale with age, but her eyes were sharp and calculating. Ambassador Vec, she hissed. I see you have not grown any sense since our last meeting. Supreme Counselor Drava, I replied. Your charm remains as consistent as ever. Her scales flickered briefly to amused purple before settling back to irritated orange. Both delegations took their seats. Security personnel positioned themselves strategically. Advisors activated their data tablets. Everyone settled into the familiar, tedious rhythm of peace talks that would go nowhere. Then I introduced the human. Distinguished delegates, I announced. The Galactic Council has appointed observer Marcus Webb of Earth to monitor these proceedings. He will provide an external perspective and observations. The room went silent. Both delegations stared at the human with expressions ranging from confusion to suspicion to outright hostility. High Commander Thak's antennae twitched. A human? What could a human possibly contribute to negotiations between civilized species? I saw Marcus's jaw tighten slightly, but his expression remained calm. Point for the human. Supreme Counselor Drava's scales shifted to skeptical yellow.
I have heard of humans. They are barely out of their own atmosphere. Why should we care about their observations?
Marcus cleared his throat. If I may, Supreme Counselor, I am here simply to observe and perhaps offer a fresh viewpoint. I have no authority to make decisions or demands. Think of me as a mirror. Thak's mandibles clicked rapidly. A mirror? Someone who reflects back what they see. Sometimes, an outside view helps clarify things. Drava's scales flickered with uncertain colors, but she eventually settled on grudging acceptance. Very well. Observe. Say nothing unless asked. Marcus nodded and took his seat in the designated observer section, a small raised platform that gave him a clear view of both tables. He pulled out an actual paper notebook. Paper. I had not seen physical paper in decades. He clicked open a pen and waited. The negotiations began exactly as I expected, which is to say they began with accusations, counter-accusations, historical grievances, and absolutely zero progress. Thak stood, his exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber lights. The Mordaks continued to occupy the seventh moon of Kaltor in direct violation of the Treaty of Shattered Stars. Drava rose to match him, her scales blazing angry red. The Treaty of Shattered Stars was signed under duress, and is therefore invalid. The Krell maintain illegal mining operations in the Vexen Nebula. Those mining operations predate the treaty. Those mining operations violate environmental accords. Your environmental accords were written by liars. Your entire species descends from thieves. And so it went. Back and forth. Claim and counterclaim. I had heard these exact same arguments. sometimes word for word in dozens of previous negotiations. I caught myself yawning and quickly turned it into a cough. Marcus, I noticed, was writing steadily in his notebook. His expression remained neutral, almost serene, which was honestly impressive given the volume at which both sides were now shouting. 3 hours passed. Both delegations had worked through their prepared statements and were now improvising creative insults. My personal favorite was when Thakald the Mordak's scale-shedding slime secretors and Drava responded by calling the Krell clicking cockroaches with delusions of grandeur. I was mentally composing my resignation letter when Marcus stood up. Just stood up. Did not ask permission. Did not wait for acknowledgement. Just rose from his chair with his notebook in hand and walked calmly to the center of the room. Both delegations fell silent. This was not protocol. Observers did not interrupt. Observers sat quietly and observed. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the silence like a laser through butter. "I have a question." Xantene stood straight up in alarm. "You are not permitted to speak." "You said I could speak if asked," Marcus replied calmly. "Well, I am asking permission to speak now. Do I have it?" Drava's scales rippled with confused colors. "This is highly irregular. So is a 600-year war," Marcus said. "Do I have permission or not?" Thak and Drava exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Finally Thak's mandibles clicked once. "Speak, human, but make it brief." Marcus smiled that small smile again. "Thank you, High Commander. My question is simple. What do you want?" Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Thak's antennae twitched in confusion. "What? What do you want?" Marcus repeated. "Both of you. Right now. Today. What do you actually want?" Drava's scales shifted to perplexed blue. "We want the Krell to withdraw from our territories. We want the Mordaks to cease their illegal mining. We want reparations for centuries of damage. We want acknowledgement of historical wrongs." Marcus held up his hand. Okay. Let me rephrase. Set aside the history for a moment. Just for a moment. If you could wave a magic wand right now and create any outcome you wanted, what would it be?" More silence. I leaned forward in my seat. This was not standard diplomatic procedure. This was not how negotiations worked. You did not just ask people what they wanted. You had protocols, frameworks, structured dialogue parameters. But something in the room had shifted. Both delegations were actually thinking about the question instead of preparing their next counter-argument. Thak spoke first, his voice quieter than before. "We want security. We want to know that our hatchlings can grow up without fear of Mordak's raids." Drava's scales softened to contemplative green. "We want access to resources. Our population is growing. We need new mining sites, new agricultural planets. We want recognition," Thak continued. "The Mordaks have never acknowledged the massacre at Kelvin Station. The Krell have never apologized for the destruction of our colony ships." Marcus was writing rapidly now, nodding as they spoke. "Good. This is good. What else?" And then something remarkable happened. Both delegations started talking. Not at each other, to Marcus. They listed grievances, yes, but also hopes, fears, practical needs. The Krell needed new trade routes because the war had destroyed their economy. The Mortaks needed medical supplies because a plague had devastated their outer colonies. Both sides wanted the fighting to stop, but neither knew how to stop without losing face in front of their own people. Marcus listened to all of it. He filled page after page in his notebook. He asked follow-up questions. He clarified points. He remained completely, utterly calm while both species essentially poured out 600 years of accumulated pain and frustration. I checked the time. 11 minutes had passed since he had started speaking. Then Marcus closed his notebook, looked up, and said the most absurd thing I had ever heard in 93 cycles of diplomatic service. "I think I can fix this," he said. "Give me 12 minutes. 12 minutes. 12 minutes." High Commander Thak's mandibles clicked so rapidly they sounded like a malfunctioning printer. "You cannot be serious." "Completely serious," Marcus said, already moving back toward the center of the room. He was not asking for permission anymore. He was just doing. Humans, I was learning, had a remarkable talent for ignoring protocol when it suited them. Supreme Counselor Drava's Scales flashed through an entire rainbow of confused colors before settling on skeptical yellow-green. Human, we have had 4,762 peace negotiations over 6 centuries. What makes you think you can accomplish in 12 minutes what the finest diplomatic minds in the galaxy have failed to do? Marcus looked at her with those calm brown eyes. Because those finest diplomatic minds were trying to negotiate peace. I am not going to negotiate anything. I felt my 3 hearts skip simultaneously. Observer Webb, what exactly are you planning? He turned to me and smiled. Actually smiled. Ambassador Vec, do you have access to the Galactic Banking Network? Yes, but what does that have to do with anything? And can you display holographic projections in this chamber? Of course, but then I need you to pull up the current resource valuations for Kelbrium ore, agricultural output data for the Outer Rim sectors, and the shipping lane efficiency reports for the past 10 cycles. Can you do that? I stared at him. My translator implant must have malfunctioned because none of what he just said made any sense in the context of peace negotiations. I suppose I can, but why would we need financial data? Trust me, Marcus said. Then he looked at both delegations. Actually, here is a better question. Do either of you trust me? Silence. Then Thak's antennae drooped slightly.
No.
Trava's scales flickered. Absolutely not. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. A genuine warm sound that echoed through the tense chamber. Good. Excellent. That is the first honest thing either of you has said to each other in probably 600 years. Let us work with that. He turned back to me. Ambassador, the data, please. We are burning daylight. We are in space, I muttered. There is no daylight. It is a human expression. The data? I sighed and activated my wrist console. Within moments, holographic screens materialized around the chamber, displaying economic reports, trade statistics, resource assessments. Both delegations looked at the data with obvious confusion. Marcus clapped his hands together once. Right, here is what I learned in the last 11 minutes. High Commander Thak, your species needs new trade routes because the war destroyed your economy. Correct? Thak's antennae twitched defensively. That is an oversimplification, but accurate. Yes. And Supreme Counselor Drava, your people need mining rights to new resource deposits because your population is expanding. Correct? Drava's scales shifted to cautious orange. That is also an oversimplification, but accurate? Yes. Rakus pointed at one of the holographic displays. This is the Vexen Nebula. The Krell maintain mining operations there, which the Mordax claim violates environmental accords, but look at this. He manipulated the display, zooming in on specific data points. The Krell are only extracting 6% of the available Kelbrium ore. 6%. The rest is sitting there untouched. Because your operations are inefficient. The Clack's mandibles clicked indignantly. Our methods are traditional. Your methods are wasteful, Marcus said, but not unkindly. Now look at this. He pulled up another screen. The Mordax have developed advanced extraction techniques that minimize environmental impact while maximizing yield. They developed these techniques for their own mining operations in the Talvor system. Drava's scales flickered with surprise. How do you know about our Talvor operations? It is in the public economic reports, Marcus said. Nobody bothered to read them. Now, here is my question. What if the Krell allowed Mordax mining corporations to operate in the Vexen Nebula using their efficient techniques in exchange for a percentage of the extracted resources? Both delegations erupted in protest simultaneously. Absolutely not. Unthinkable. The Mordax cannot be trusted in our territory. The Krell would sabotage our operations. Marcus held up both hands. Stop. Stop. Listen to yourselves. You are both so focused on not letting the other side win that you are letting everyone lose. Thak, your economy is collapsing. You need resources. The Vexen Nebula has resources you cannot efficiently extract. Drava, your people need new mining sites. You have the technology to extract those resources efficiently. This is not complicated mathematics. He pulled up another display. Here are the projected revenues if you maintained current operations. Here are the projected revenues if you allowed joint operations with profit sharing. The difference is approximately 400 billion credits per cycle. The numbers glowed in the air. They were impossible to ignore. Thak's antennae twitched rapidly. Joint operations with the enemy? Joint operations with business partners, Marcus corrected. And before you say anything about trust, let me show you something else. He pulled up shipping lane data. Both your species maintain separate shipping routes through the same sectors. You spend enormous resources protecting convoys from each other. Combined, you spend approximately 2 trillion credits per cycle on military escorts alone. Drava's scales shifted to interested green. Are you suggesting we share shipping lanes? I am suggesting that neutral third-party shipping corporations, which already exist in the galaxy, would be happy to handle logistics for both of you. It would cost each of you approximately 1/10 of what you currently spend. The savings alone would fund reconstruction efforts on both your worlds for the next 50 cycles. I found myself leaning forward, actually engaged for the first time in decades of these negotiations. The human was not talking about treaties or historical justice or moral high grounds. He was talking about money, resources, practical benefits. It was so obvious that it was revolutionary. Marcus pulled up more screens. The 7th moon of Kaltor, the disputed territory you have been fighting over for 3 centuries. Do you know what is actually there? It is sacred ground, Thak insisted. It is ancestral territory, Drava countered. It is a barren rock with a minimal gravity well and absolutely no strategic value whatsoever, Marcus said flatly. I checked. The only reason either of you wants it is because the other side wants it. Here is my proposal. Turn it into a joint memorial. Build a monument to all the lives lost in this war. Make it neutral ground where both species can come to remember and mourn. The chamber fell silent. Marcus continued, his voice softer now. You both mentioned massacres and atrocities. Kelvin Station, the colony ships. These things happened. They were terrible. They caused unimaginable pain. But here is the thing about apologies and acknowledgments. They mean nothing if they come from governments. Governments apologize to save face, to fulfill treaty obligations. It is empty. He looked directly at Thak. High Commander, you lost someone at Kelvin Station, didn't you? Thak's antennae drooped. My clutch sibling. My closest family. I am sorry, Marcus said simply. Truly, and Supreme Counselor Drava, the colony ships. You lost people too. Drava's scales faded to mourning gray. My first mate, my children, 300,000 souls. I am so sorry, Marcus repeated. Both of your species have suffered terribly. Both of you have valid pain, but making the other side hurt more will not reduce your own hurt. It just adds to the total amount of suffering in the universe. He paused, letting that sink in. Here is what I propose. Real acknowledgement comes from truth. Open your archives. All of them. Let independent historians from neutral species examine everything. Document what actually happened. All the battles, all the atrocities, all the mistakes on both sides. Publish it. Teach it. Make sure every Krella hatchling and every Mordax child learns the real cost of this war. Not propaganda. Not heroic myths. The truth. Thak's voice was barely above a whisper. The truth would make us look like monsters. The truth would make you look like people, Marcus said. People who got caught in a terrible cycle and didn't know how to stop. There is no shame in that. The shame is in continuing when you finally have a chance to stop. I watched as both delegations processed this. The chamber was so quiet I could hear the environmental systems humming. Marcus checked his watch. An actual mechanical watch. The man was full of anachronisms. 9 minutes, so far. Let me finish. You are going to say that your people will not accept peace, that there is too much hatred, too much history, and you are probably right. If you go home tomorrow and announce peace, you will both likely be overthrown by your own populations. Both leaders shifted uncomfortably. He had hit a nerve. So do not announce peace, Marcus said. Announce a limited trade agreement. Just one. Something small. Mordax, mining technology in exchange for Krella medical supplies. Your plague, Counselor Drava. The Krella have effective treatments. Did you know that? Drava's scales flickered with surprise. No, we did not. They do. Tak, did you know the Mordax have food synthesis technology that could solve your agricultural shortages? Tak's mandibles clicked uncertainly. No. Both of these problems could be solved with simple trade. Not peace. Not friendship. Just business. Start small. Let your people see the benefits, then expand. Add another agreement, then another. In 10 cycles you will have so many interconnected economic relationships that war becomes impractical. In 20 cycles, an entire generation will have grown up with peace as normal. He closed his notebook. You do not need a peace treaty, you need an excuse to stop fighting that lets both sides save face. I just gave you that excuse. Economics, trade, practical benefits. Tell your people that you are not surrendering. You are not forgetting the past. You are simply making smart business decisions. Nobody can argue with profit margins. Marcus looked at his watch again. 11 minutes, 40 seconds. I still have 20 seconds left. The chamber remained silent. Both delegations were staring at the human with expressions I could not quite identify. Shock? Awe? Confusion? Probably all three. Finally, High Commander Thack spoke. You are suggesting we replace 600 years of warfare with capitalism? Marcus shrugged. I am suggesting you replace 600 years of warfare with not warfare. Call it whatever you want. Capitalism, pragmatism, mutual benefit. The label does not matter. The result does. Supreme Counselor Drava's scales had shifted to a color I had never seen before. A soft, pale blue that my cultural database identified as hopeful contemplation. And you believe this would work? I believe it has a better chance than 4,762 previous attempts, Marcus said, and even if it fails, you are no worse off than you are now. But if it succeeds, you could spend the next 600 years building instead of destroying. Your choice. He sat down. Just like that. Dropped the metaphorical microphone and sat down. I looked at the chronometer. 12 minutes exactly. Radak and Drava looked at each other across the chamber. A long, measuring look. 600 years of hatred and pain and loss hung in the air between them. Then Drava spoke. The medical supplies. For our plague. You would trade these? The Sack's antennae twitched. In exchange for the food synthesis technology, and perhaps mining consultation for the Vexen Nebula operations. Joint revenue sharing? 70-30 split in our favor. 60-40. 65-35. Acceptable. I nearly fell out of my chair. They were negotiating. Actually, negotiating. Not about history or justice, or honor. About percentages and trade goods and practical benefits. The next 2 hours passed in a blur. Both delegations hammered out the details of a limited trade agreement. There were arguments, certainly, disagreements about terms and conditions, but they were productive arguments. Arguments with solutions. By the end of the session, we had a signed preliminary trade agreement. Not a peace treaty, not an end to the war technically, just a business arrangement. But it was more progress than 93 cycles of traditional diplomacy had achieved. As both delegations filed out of the chamber considerably less hostile than when they had arrived, I approached Marcus. He was gathering his notebook and pen, looking tired but satisfied. Observer Webb, I said. That was either the most brilliant thing I have ever witnessed or the most reckless. I honestly cannot decide which. He smiled. Ambassador Vec, may I tell you a secret about humanity? Please do. We are really good at fighting. We spent most of our history doing it. Wars, conflicts, violence. We have it down to a science. But eventually we figured something out. Fighting is expensive. It wastes resources. It kills people who could be building things or inventing things or creating things. Peace is not about moral superiority or ethical high grounds. It is about basic economics. Cooperation is more profitable than conflict. That is a very cynical view of peace. Maybe, Marcus admitted, but it works. The Krell and Mordax will not become friends overnight. Maybe they never will, but they do not need to be friends. They just need to find it more beneficial to cooperate than to fight. Give them enough interconnected interests, and peace maintains itself. I considered this. Your species learned this lesson? Eventually, after far too many wars and far too many deaths. But yes, we learned. Now we are trying to share that lesson. He paused. Though I will admit I was not entirely sure this would work. There was a solid 30% chance both delegations would just shoot me and go back to fighting. 30%? You took those odds? Marcus shrugged. Seemed better than the alternative of watching 600 more years of war. 3 cycles later I received word that the Krell-Mordax trade agreement was being expanded. Food shipments had begun. Medical supplies were flowing, mining consultation was underway. Both governments were reporting the economic benefits to their populations. 6 cycles after that, a second trade agreement was signed, then a third. 1 cycle ago, I attended the dedication ceremony for the memorial on the 7th moon of Kaltor. Both species sent delegations. There were speeches about remembrance and loss. There were no apologies, no acknowledgments of wrongdoing, just a shared commitment to remember. But there was also a joint research station being built nearby. Krell and Mordax scientists working together on agricultural projects. The war is not technically over. Both militaries still exist. Both governments still maintain they are in the right, but nobody has fired a shot in over a year. Trade has become too valuable. Economic interconnection has made conflict impractical. Exactly as Marcus predicted. I submitted my report to Director Quinn. His eye stalks wiggled in that way that meant he was simultaneously impressed and annoyed that he had been right. So the human observer fixed a 600-year war in 12 minutes, he asked. Technically, I corrected. He provided a framework that allowed both parties to find a mutually beneficial path forward, which they then implemented over the following cycles through careful negotiation and economic restructuring. Vec, did he fix the war in 12 minutes or not? I sighed. Yes. Director, the human fixed the war in 12 minutes. Quinn's eye stalks wiggled again. Humans, who would have thought? Not me, Director. Definitely not me. As I filed my final report and prepared for my next assignment, I found myself thinking about Marcus's words. Peace through economics. Cooperation through self-interest. It was not poetic. It was not noble. It was not the kind of thing they would write inspirational songs about. But it worked. And sometimes in this complicated galaxy full of ancient grudges and impossible conflicts, working is all that matters. Somewhere on Earth, Marcus Webb was probably dealing with the next impossible problem, armed with nothing but a crooked tie, a paper notebook, and an absurd amount of practical common sense. The galaxy, I reflected, had no idea what it was in for. We had invited a human to observe peace talks. He had ended a 600-year war in 12 minutes. And honestly, I was just grateful his tie had been crooked. If humans could do all that while properly dressed, they would be absolutely terrifying.